All right, today, Reef Tank Rock, the buyer's guide, meaning that you're gonna find out all the things you wanna know to find out which rock was right for you. We're talking about the cheapest one. We're talking about the caviest one.
It's a thing,
Yeah, it's a real thing. We're gonna talk about the most creative and unique options, simply what looks best. Really, we're gonna find out about all the things that you could possibly wanna know about all these rocks, so you make sure you get the right one the first time. But first, the part everybody likes best. Which one is the best seller that all you guys are buying the most of, as well as Randy and I's pick? Start with that best seller.
So the best seller is Marco Rock by pounds and dollars. This is the most bang for your buck. Cheapest usually wins that best seller category.
I don't know if usually is the right word, but often so. Yeah, by like a landslide.
Yeah.
The Marco Rock at like $3-ish a pound is easily the #1 seller by far, as voted by you guys with your dollars as what everybody's picking up. But what, spoiler alert, is Randy and Ryan's favorite?
My favorite is the Real Reef Rock. And it's not the most inexpensive. It's double the cost, but insta-tank, meaning it's got some bacteria on there when it's shipped in this paper that's wet, and it's purple from right off the bat. Just looks good day one.
I would note that not all of it shipped wet. I don't think the branch does, or
Nope.
maybe the shelf, but the normal pieces right under here are absolutely shipped in moist in these wrapped in paper. So I will note that you should get it into water pretty quick, because once you take the paper off, it actually dries out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So you want to get all those benefits. But yeah, so that's your favorite.
That's mine.
All right. My favorite is actually still the Marco Rock, except for NSA. So if you followed along, basically NSA, you're just gonna break all of this up into pits with our little bits with a chisel, and then glue it back together and create whatever structure you're looking for.
Yeah.
Often with a ton of caves, a lot of negative space, and really creating something artistic takes a little bit of time.
Yes.
But this is definitely my personal favorite. All right, so for everyone else, we like to break this down into little categories that like really speak to us.
Yeah.
Like, this is for me, I'm that person,
Yeah,
right?
one of these will speak to you.
Yeah, first, of course, is it's the cheapest. I'm looking for the cheapest option that works, and we've already hit on it. It is the Marco Rock here.
Yeah, well, about $3-ish per pound, and easy to aquascape, especially when it comes to putting these things together and stacking them up. But if you want the most rock bang for your buck, that's definitely the one.
Yeah, it's the cleanest, doesn't have any organics on it, it's really easy to use, and like you said, it aquascapes really easy because the little pieces just interlock together, and it's just really, really easy to use, and happens to also be the cheapest, probably why it's the most popular. All right, next category is easiest to cycle. I bet you a lot of people's hands raised up and said, oh, this is me. I want really easy. I want it to be a nice, smooth path right in the beginning.
Yes.
This is specific to new reefers. Really, actually, probably everybody, but if you're brand new, this could change the entire trajectory of your tank. If you do it this way, you'll probably have the highest chances of initial success. And that's live rock from the fish store that's submerged in water, covered in coralline, covered in bacteria.
Ready to go.
Yes, ready to go. If you use that rock, you'll have the easiest path in those first initial year or two, making sure that the tank is cycled, it supports life, and really doesn't promote a lot of pest organisms either, like the cyano and the dinos. Other things might come on a little bit later, but like the initial year or so is gonna be really, really easy. But it's not cheap.
It is expensive. Upwards of, $12.99 a pound to the CS team was telling us like $33 or 30 some bucks a pound, depending on where you get it, which is a lot of money.
Yeah, I was surprised to actually hear that. So I polled all of the CS agents where they've seen live rock last and how much it cost, and it was $12 to like all the way to 30, which is like 100 pounds makes $3,000. It's pretty expensive. All right, and that's because it's pretty rare these days.
It's hard to find.
There's not a whole lot of actual live rock coming out of the ocean these days. Most of it is what you're going to see here, which is mined rock or artificial rock that's been cured in different ways. But all right, one of the things you do get from live rock, especially stuff that's kind of housed in bins that get turned over a lot, is a lot of pests. So the aptasia, the bubble algae, all those kinds of things.
Things like that, yeah.
I would say, though, if this is your first rodeo, some of those pests really aren't your biggest concern, because you're probably going to upgrade after you're successful in a couple of years. So
they're manageable.
Yeah, they're manageable. It's more important you have a really easy start. All right. So, however, really, really expensive and brand new, don't match. So there's a different option.
Yeah, so this is where my favorite, my pick from earlier comes in. That's the real reef stuff. So it's that pest-free cycle. So new intermediate to, advanced users or hobbyists, you can get that beneficial bacteria of the starting of the cycle, really ramp up the speed and the ease of getting in past that first year because this stuff ships damp. So you get all those benefits and not the pests like aptasia and bubble algae and things like that.
So this stuff actually soaks in salt water for months. It's an artificial rock, but it's really cool looking. Yeah. It's purple instead of white, and so it doesn't either it doesn't grow as many algae, or you just can't see them because it's on purple instead of white. But it generally has a really clean start to a brand new tank, whether it be from the bacteria and soaking in there for months.
Looks good day one.
But I don't know, for about $6 a pound, this seems to be that hybrid in the middle. You may see a couple algae on it, but you won't get like aptasia and other stuff on this type of rock. So, I don't know. One of the hybrids here, if you're thinking about easiest to cycle, live rock, got some challenges including cost and pests, but on the other end of that is like $6 a pound, and it's real reef, has some of those advantages, and probably why it's more popular. All right, the third category of people is I want this to look awesome in my tank. I mean, essentially, the aquascape that you're going to build in here is going to be the primary piece of artwork in the room, the sculpture that you create, and some of them are way easier to sculpt with than others. Yeah,
so the easiest way to aquascape, the easiest rock to aquascape with, the Marco rock here, because it's from a stacking standpoint where if I just want to get this done and I don't want to do the gluing and all this other stuff, I just need to get this in there. Maybe I'm a little creatively challenged when it comes to it. I just stack the stuff up.
Yeah, the reason is just because it has all these nooks and crannies and everything in it and all these little holes. And the jagged edges, again, interlock with each other. Yeah. So it's just super easy to create a seamless piece. And the only thing you really need to do to connect the two things together is some super glue. And so once I put the super glue in there, I can now just hold this thing together, use a little accelerator, and boom, it's done inside of seconds.
There you go.
And so stacking it, definitely this is probably the easiest way to create caves and negative spaces and get a really cool aquascape. But for those of us that are a little bit more artistically challenged or never done this before, there's another option.
Yeah, so if you like those caves and you just can't build them yourself or can't envision it, these Carib Sea life rock, the shapes, the trees, the arches, all of them come in shapes that I can't make this, out of that rock unless I break it up and use mortar and cement and stuff. So they made it already for you. So if you want some of those unique shapes, you don't have to get too creative with it. Some already exist.
Yeah, so this is super, super popular, especially I think these arches.
Yeah.
This is actually, this piece doesn't exist in nature as a collectible piece that will ship around the world or anything like this. And it won't come out of the ground either. So this has to be made this way. And you can either do it yourself or you can take somebody who's already done it before and they'll build it for you. And so there's all kinds of pieces here. This little guy will have, a little cave underneath. And again, there's no piece that comes this way. So yeah, these Carib Sea shapes, they actually have the same some of the benefits of being purple, which means that
looks good.
It looks good.
Right
it
off
doesn't,
the bat.
yeah, an insta-tank look.
Yeah.
And it doesn't show algae and stuff as much. But if you're looking to have a really cool aquascape and do it at your first time, this is probably the easiest stuff to do it with. All right, this is the one that speaks to me. This is the one that I get really excited about. So if your priority is to make the most unique and creative option, you really want to put some time into this.
Personalize
it. And it's not just a stack of rocks anymore. Yeah. Essentially, you're going to create some of this stuff, but you're going to do it on your own and create it really in a unique manner that isn't just carbon copy. It's the NSA Aquascape, negative space Aquascape.
Yeah, so this one, I mean, kudos to you for sitting in your driveway and figuring this out for a little. It took you a week or so to make a small one. It took a couple weeks to a month or so to make a big one. But basically all you're doing is just buying a whole bunch of Marco rock, breaking it all into tiny pieces, and then reassembling in ways that really looks awesome. So you can make, jutting out pieces. You can make these ones that blend together but aren't really connected. All kinds of negative space. Looks really, really cool full of corals.
Yeah, so you know what? It will take some time. So the first one, you know, it took me like I don't know, probably 3 or 4 days sitting in my driveway. The second one took Dave and I probably 2 weeks, or a full week, but with 2 of us. You know, it took us some time. So you're probably doing this in your garage for you know, a few weekends till you get it right. You probably break it apart, put it back together. But again, you're going to create those like really like almost impossible looking juts out.
Amazing.
You know, and it branches out, creates a lot of like areas for the fish to like hover under. You can see things hide, but in open space.
Yeah.
And there's something about it that when you made this, nobody else will ever have anything that looks exactly like yours. It won't be just a mound of rock, but it's an artistic vision. So you actually,
pride.
Pride. You have to have like have that vision a little bit and the willingness to put some time into it. But you can go watch the NSA video where we show the actual steps on how to do that. Maybe we'll link to that in the end here. But for me, if you want to create the most unique aquascapes, it's generally because you busted the rock down into smaller pieces and then reassembled it into what you want. All right, so one of those probably spoke to you, says, I'm this person and I probably want that type of rock. But there are a couple other tips or considerations when you're buying rock that you should think about up front. The first one is how much?
Yeah, that's probably the biggest question that I know when I was a CS agent I'd answer, and some of the CS agents here is how much pounds do I need for my tank? So rule of thumb, roughly about 1 pound per gallon, and then there's some caveats to that. So 1.5 pounds is probably the safest bet because not every rock that you're going to get is, Marco or whatever you're buying is going to be the perfect rock. Having a little more gives you more options.
Yeah, so if the goal is to do this as cheap as possible, it's probably around $1 or 1 pound per gallon of water, rather. If the goal is to make it look as awesome as possible, it's probably closer to that 1.5 pounds. Because if I only gave you the exact amount of rocks that fits your tank, the fact that they're going to create what you actually want out of that is really low. For instance, when we create a lot of our aquascapes, I mean, we're digging through thousands of pounds trying to get the right pieces. So having some extra pieces around, and to be honest, you're probably going to use those things somewhere else. Maybe you'll break them into frag mounts. Maybe you'll
throw them in the sump or whatever.
Sump for the future or other filtration. You'll probably use it anyway. But having extra pieces, this is one of those things that I'm going to caution. Some people might just say, oh, I'm not going to do that. Do it, because you'll be so much happier with the end result. And the real portion of this is I want it to look awesome, and having the pieces that allow me to do that is how I do it to begin with. All right, but what if you're doing the NSA?
More is better. And 1.5 will probably get you there, but I've seen you break apart a bunch of these pieces, and you're probably leaning more towards like 2 pounds per gallon to get all the right kind of pieces and nooks and crannies you want. You might break some too far, and then you need to start with a bigger piece again.
I actually found the other direction. Is I started with probably 2 pounds per gallon, and I was trying to make bigger pieces, like maybe only crack this in half. And in that environment, I definitely needed the 2 pounds. But when I started breaking it even smaller and then reassembling it together, I found that I could actually use a vast majority of the rock. But if I was doing the NSA, you know that there's going to be some waste pieces from the breaking it up, and there'll be some rubble. So 1.5 pounds for the NSA is probably about right. But what about an SPS tank? This one is a total outlier. We're going to go the total other direction.
Yeah, so the SPS tank, and you've seen some of our aquascaping and flow videos and all these other ones before, even in our aquascaping mistakes video, it's, SPS, we made the mistake on the 160, and that's building the rock too high in the tank, meaning we've covered the 3/4 of the height of the tank when actually 5 years later, coral's growing up and hitting the surface. I mean, we went too far. So you got to plan ahead a little bit, which means you can actually use less rock because you're not building as high. So about 3/4 of a pound per gallon, and you're only going to build it halfway up.
Yeah, so that's the important part there, is note that when you're building the aquascape with an SPS tank, note the corals are going to grow up, and they're going to be big. And so we don't want them growing out of the water. So day one, the aquascape's actually not going to look probably as impressive because you're not going to go above about half the tank. Maybe a couple pieces go a little higher than half the tank, but you're going to expect the corals to actually fill in that space. And you'll be really happy to do that. Day one, it will look empty. But, so if you're going to do an SPS tank, I would definitely follow that advice of only filling it about halfway. And for that reason, you probably only need about 3/4 of a pound per gallon of water. Another tip here is some of these rocks are actually harder to aquascape or use than others.
Yeah, so the branch stuff here is something I found too, and I used a branch only in my 60-gallon in my office. And you know, using branch only, it actually turned out to be a pretty interesting piece, but it can be difficult to like add a branch on some of your boulder rocks and not look odd or wonky out of the gate. So that's something to consider is, you know, if you're going to use branch, can you make it flow into the rest and look good, or just go all branch?
Yeah, so a lot of people like to mix rocks, and I gotta tell you that it often looks really foreign unless it's done well. So if it's done well, anything done well looks awesome. But if it's not done well, it looks really foreign and like mismatched and odd. And so if I just like take this thing and have it like shoot out the top, it kind of looks like a fake coral per se. It just doesn't look like an extension necessarily of the other rock, you know? So sometimes it's kind of hard to aquascape branch. I know a lot of people like to use it because it's different and they want to be unique with it. But note, especially because you don't necessarily get all the exact pieces you were hoping for in every case.
Yeah, and some. So you might get a big giant piece like this or one little branch or nub, but you know, one thing I will say about the branch, especially in my 60-gallon tank, is a great way to add extra space. So I can put another one of these branches in my tank and it looks seamless with the rest of the branches, but now I've just gained a whole bunch of surface area for like more acros or whatever I want to put on there.
You know, another way you could use this branch is actually to break it up into 3 pieces, because if I broke this guy off, pretend this was all filled with coral and I wanted to put more coral because I'm a coral junkie. I will break this off and I could actually glue it on like in a different area shooting out, and now put little frags all over it, and it'll become a natural extension. So it's actually kind of a unique way, especially if you're gonna hide it with other coral, of expanding the available amount of rock work. But note, this is kind of an advanced tool to work with, and I'll say some of the shelves are similar too. You want to create that shelf look. A lot of times all shelf stacked on top of itself will look very natural, but just having shelves shoot out everywhere, sometimes it doesn't look as natural as you'd like. The one exception to shelf being difficult is definitely Marco's shelf, which is different.
Yeah, so Marco's shelf, I mean, all you have to do is look at the 750 XXL, where we're using shelf all throughout, this exclusively shelf, and it just tons of area. SPS lovers dream, my dream, tons of surface area to put sticks on. They have room to grow out and branch. It looks really, really good shelf all through.
It's super, super easy to stack and create kind of cave effects because they layer on top of each other. I know I was actually inspired by Greg Carroll's tank. Hopefully he'll let us show it here. But it was really awesome. I saw that, I'm like, oh, I need to have a tank like this too, because it looks really, really cool. And it's super easy actually to do. So this shelf, because it's Marco rock and it just tends to lock into itself like that, is a lot easier and a really unique, popular look. And one of the things about Marco's shelf is a lot of this other shelf is kind of like either a big plating coral, which is like super hard to incorporate. It looks really strange actually in most cases. Or it's artificial. This stuff is actually machined. So they kind of like machine it out of bigger blocks and create this stuff. And so it is more expensive because there's a lot of work that goes into creating it. They're not just collecting it out of there. But it does create a very unique look. Next one, regardless of what type of rock you use, you should use one of these.
Yes, foundation rock. Marco's foundation rock. I used it for my branch only tank in the office. And I mean, look, you didn't even know it was there, but it's so nice to have a very smooth, flat, structurally sound base. I can put it on the bottom of my tank. When the sand comes over the top of it, it looks just naturally coming out of the sand, and a great base for boulders that are kind of weird edges that may not sit right, but anything I put on here. The other side is really nice and unique because that Marco rock, you know how they all interlock really well. Having that, as a boulder structure, I can actually have more surface area touch points when I put a boulder on there rather than putting a boulder dead on the bottom of my tank.
I don't think any scape should actually have even if you're doing bottoms. This is super awesome because it looks like an extension, like it's coming out of the bottom, right? The mount's super flat. I think that virtually any aquascape should start with this because it's very, very stable. It creates a mounting spot where you can glue onto. You're not going to glue on the bottom of your tank. It provides all that stability and security that you're looking for. I will say I started using this slightly different in my tank as well. I started using it in some areas where I have sand that's about as tall as this. And I put the corals that like brains and stuff on it.
Hooks around.
It doesn't. The sand actually starts to cover it, but never gets buried anymore. So if you want to create little islands of cool corals and stuff, the small foundation will actually help you do that as well. So yeah, I don't know, the foundation rock. I would say get a few pieces of that in almost every case, and you'll be really happy with the stability that it creates. All right, so you can probably see why Marco Rock is the #1 favorite, at least as voted by dollars, pounds, or really any metric that you can possibly think of.
Easy to use.
But you can also see why Randy probably picked out the Real Reef as his #1.
Yeah, I am a big fan of having purple from day one because it makes it it makes it easier for me to look at, and also getting through that first year. So if you want to smooth sail a little easier than doing just bone white rock, get some Real Reef rock. It has the bacteria, it'll get you through it, and it just looks great. I can look at it all day long.
To be honest, if it wasn't for the NSA, I might be in the same camp as you just because it looks good day one.
Yeah.
Right? That's an important feature, actually. But for me, you know what? I'm getting closer and closer every year to like 20 years of reefing. I think I'm at 17. I've done a lot of aquascapes, and for me, this now really speaks to me. The break it up and create my own, use the NSA. That speaks to me. The process of it taking a month is actually part of the hobby for me and how much I enjoyed the whole thing. So, you can see why we picked all of these things, and one of these things almost certainly speaks to you. And if you want to look at all the rocks, what other people are saying, you can check them all out here on the Bulk Reef Supply site, but you can also see how we did the NSA over here, over on YouTube, so check it out.